Emma Carter had mastered the art of pretending. It was a skill honed over years of routine, a careful balance of forced smiles, measured words, and an unshakable facade of contentment. To the world, she was the devoted wife of Daniel Carter, a respected financial consultant whose job consumed him, leaving little room for affection. Their house, a pristine two-story home nestled in an affluent neighborhood, was immaculate but hollow, a reflection of the emptiness that had settled between them. That evening, as she set the dinner table, the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock filled the silence. She glanced at the time. 7:48 p.m. Late again. Daniel's absence had long ceased to surprise her. She placed a wine glass down and sighed. Loneliness had crept into her life like an uninvited guest, settling into the spaces between their conversations, the vacant side of the bed, the untouched dinners. There had been a time when she longed for his attention, when she tried to ignite the passion that once defined their marriage. Now, she had surrendered to the quiet disappointment of routine. The sound of her phone vibrating against the counter broke the stillness. Message. Ryan Adams. Hey, my mom said you were stopping by tomorrow. I'll be around. It's been a while. A subtle warmth spread through her at the unexpected text. Ryan. Sophia's son. She had known him since he was a teenager, an awkward yet charming boy who had grown into a confident young man. The last time she had seen him was months ago, before he left for a brief internship out of state. He was back now, and something about his message made her pulse quicken in a way she wasn't prepared for. Her fingers hovered over the screen before she typed a response. Yes, I'll be there. It's been a while. She hesitated before adding, looking forward to catching up. Then, after a moment, she deleted the last part. Before she could dwell on it further, the front door opened. Daniel walked in, briefcase in hand. His expression impassive. You're late, she said, her voice lacking any real accusation. Had a meeting that ran over, he replied, loosening his tie. He glanced at the plated dinner but didn't sit down. I grabbed something on the way home. Of course he had. Emma nodded, pressing her lips together. She should have been used to this, yet the familiar ache returned, dull but persistent. I'm going to shower, he added, already heading upstairs. She remained at the table, staring at the untouched food, the weight of another silent evening pressing against her chest. The next afternoon, Emma pulled into Sophia's driveway, exhaling slowly before stepping out. Sophia greeted her with a warm embrace, ushering her inside. It's been too long, Em. How have you been? Emma smiled, the practiced kind she had perfected. Keeping busy. They settled in the kitchen, falling into easy conversation about old acquaintances and neighborhood gossip. But Emma's attention flickered toward the hallway as footsteps approached. And then there he was. Ryan Adams had changed. Gone was the boy she remembered. In his place stood a man who carried himself with effortless confidence. At 24, he had a lean, athletic frame. His dark hair slightly tousled, as if he had just run his hands through it. His eyes, sharp and knowing, met hers with a familiarity that sent a strange flutter through her chest. Emma, he said, his voice smoother, deeper than she recalled. Good to see you. She smiled, willing herself to appear composed. You too, Ryan. Sophia beamed. He just got back last week. Still figuring out his next steps, aren't you, honey? Ryan shrugged. Something like that. He leaned against the counter, his gaze lingering on Emma in a way that was almost assessing. It was subtle, but she felt it. They spent the afternoon reminiscing, laughter filling the space where nostalgia took root. But beneath the casual conversation, Emma couldn't shake the awareness creeping up her spine. Later, as she gathered her purse, Ryan followed her to the door. I'm glad you came, he said, his tone quieter, more intimate. Emma hesitated, fingers tightening around the strap of her bag. I always enjoy catching up with your mom. He smirked slightly. I wasn't talking about my mom. Her breath hitched, just for a second, just enough for him to notice. She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came. And then the moment passed. She stepped outside, inhaling the crisp evening air, trying to steady the pulse in her throat. As she drove away, she told herself it was nothing. But deep down she knew better. The first mistake was thinking about him after she left. The second was opening his message when it arrived later that evening. Ryan, it was nice seeing you today. I hope we don't wait that long next time. Emma read the text twice before locking her phone and setting it face down on the kitchen counter. She shouldn't feel anything about it. Shouldn't be analyzing his words or wondering if there was something unspoken beneath them. Yet she was. She ran her fingers over the smooth surface of her wine glass, exhaling slowly. The house was quiet as it always was. Daniel had come home late, retreating into his office without so much as a real conversation. If he noticed the distance between them, he didn't care enough to address it. Maybe that was why Ryan's words lingered. Maybe that was why she typed a response. Emma, it was nice seeing you too. She deleted it, rewrote it. Emma, it really has been too long. This time she hit send. The days passed in an unremarkable blur. She filled them with errands, lunch dates with acquaintances, and evenings spent in the quiet suffocation of her home. She told herself she wasn't waiting to hear from him, but when his name appeared on her screen again, something warm and reckless bloomed inside her. Ryan, I meant what I said. We shouldn't wait that long. She hesitated before responding. Emma, are you suggesting something? His reply came almost instantly. Ryan, meet me for coffee. It was a simple request. Harmless. But something about it felt like the first step toward a place she wasn't sure she should go. She told herself it was just coffee. She told herself she could handle it. The cafe was tucked into a quiet corner of town, far enough from familiar eyes that she felt safe stepping inside. The scent of roasted coffee beans and cinnamon filled the space, wrapping around her like a comforting embrace. Ryan was already there, seated near the window, his fingers wrapped around a steaming mug. When he saw her, he smiled, an easy, confident smile that sent an unwelcome thrill through her. You came, he said as she slid into the seat across from him. I said I would, she replied, keeping her voice light, unaffected. Their conversation started safely enough. He talked about his time away, the uncertainty of his next steps, the pull between ambition and expectation. She listened, nodding, offering thoughtful responses when appropriate. But the space between them felt different, charged. And when the topic drifted toward the personal, neither of them stopped it. You seem different, Ryan said, studying her. Emma arched a brow. How so? I don't know. He tilted his head slightly. Less like how I remember you. More like, he trailed off, considering his words. More like someone who's tired of pretending. Her stomach clenched. She could deflect, laugh it off, steer the conversation back to safer ground. But she didn't. Maybe I am, she admitted softly. Ryan leaned forward slightly, his elbows resting on the table. Why? She let out a slow breath. Because I have spent years being someone's wife, someone's obligation, and somewhere along the way, I forgot who I was before that. It was more honesty than she had meant to give. More than she had spoken aloud in years. Ryan didn't look away. He didn't offer empty platitudes or tell her she was wrong. He just listened, and somehow that felt more dangerous than anything else. A beat of silence passed before he spoke again. You deserve more than that. The words settled between them, heavy and unspoken in all the ways that mattered. Emma should have ended it there. She should have smiled, thanked him for the coffee, and walked away before the ground beneath her shifted any further. Instead she stayed. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel invisible. As she drove home, her mind replayed their conversation, the weight of his words pressing against her ribs. She knew she was standing at the edge of something precarious. She just wasn't sure if she wanted to step back. Emma told herself she wouldn't see him again. She told herself their conversation had been a moment of weakness, an indulgence she couldn't afford to repeat. Yet, less than a week later, she found herself standing outside the same cafe, pulse quickening as she spotted him inside. Ryan looked up just as she stepped through the door. The way his expression softened, the way his lips curved into a knowing smile, it sent something sharp and unsteady through her. "You're late," he teased as she slid into the seat across from him. She exhaled, feigning nonchalance. "I wasn't aware we were keeping track." He smirked, fingers drumming lightly against the table. "I am." The weight of his gaze was unnerving, not because it was intense, but because it was undeniable. He saw her in a way that made her chest tighten, that made her feel like something more than just Daniel Carter's wife. And she wasn't sure if that terrified her or thrilled her. Their conversation started where it had left off the last time. Easy, effortless, yet laced with something unspoken. She found herself laughing more than she had in years, felt herself relax in a way that had become foreign. Then Ryan leaned in slightly, voice lowering just enough to make her heart skip. "I think about you," he admitted. "More than I should." Her breath caught, fingers tightening around her coffee cup. There it was. Line. The boundary neither of them had dared to name. Emma swallowed hard. "Ryan, you don't have to say anything," he interrupted gently. "I just needed you to know." Silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken questions and possibilities neither of them were ready to acknowledge. She should have walked away then. Instead she stayed. That night, Emma lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her thoughts tangled in a dangerous web of memory and longing. Daniel was beside her, already asleep, his breathing slow and even. He hadn't asked about her day. He hadn't noticed the way her mind had been somewhere else entirely. Emma turned onto her side, pressing her lips together. She wasn't naive. She knew where this path led, knew the cost of even entertaining the possibility of Ryan. But the problem with temptation wasn't just desire. It was the way it made you question everything you had accepted as enough. And for the first time in years, she wasn't sure if she could keep pretending. The next time she saw Ryan, it wasn't planned. She was leaving the grocery store when she spotted him leaning against his car, phone in hand. He looked up just as she walked past, his expression shifting from surprise to something softer, something unreadable. "Emma," he said, pushing off the car. She hesitated for a fraction of a second, just long enough to make a choice. "Ryan." He studied her for a moment, as if deciding whether or not to say what was on his mind. Then he took a slow step forward. "Take a drive with me." It wasn't a demand. It wasn't even a request. It was an invitation. And against all reason, she found herself nodding. She left her car in the parking lot, slid into the passenger seat of his, and exhaled as he pulled onto the road. The air between them was thick with everything they weren't saying. "Where are we going?" she finally asked. Ryan glanced at her, amusement flickering in his gaze. Does it matter? Should have. But it didn't. Not when she was sitting beside him, the windows down, the wind threading through her hair, and the heavy weight of her reality slipping further behind her with every mile. For the first time in years, she didn't feel trapped. For the first time in years, she felt alive.